So according to the beautiful people over at 9 to 5 Mac, it looks like Apple is set to fully revamp their iPad lineup in 2024. So unless you absolutely need to get an iPad today or tomorrow, I highly recommend holding off until 2024 because I think it's going to be very well worth it. So in this video, what I want to do is talk about each one of those iPad upgrades, when to expect them, and what to expect overall. But before we get started, a quick word from our sponsor, BenQ. BenQ recently released their Design View monitors, a family of monitors purpose-built with the designer, creator, and Mac user in mind. The PD2706UA, which is their 27-inch variant, comes with everything any designer, creator, or business professional would ever need out of a premium monitor. This monitor provides us with a bright and color-accurate IPS LED 3840 by 2160 true 4K display. One of the best things about the display is that it comes with multiple display modes, but out of the box it comes ready to go with a proprietary M-Book mode, which is a display mode purpose-built for Mac users. The idea is to be as color accurate as possible compared to what Apple gives us out of their MacBooks and Mac displays. This is also a single cable solution, meaning that you need one Thunderbolt cable, which comes provided in the packaging, to get your desk setup up and running. This monitor also supports up to 65 watts of power pass-through to your laptop, which is plenty to make sure that you're always juiced up, and since it is powered by a Thunderbolt, the monitor turns into a USB-C hub of sorts, giving you an extra 2 HDMI 2.0 ports, a display port, an additional 15-watt Thunderbolt out port, a USB Type-B port, and another USB-C port to daisy-chain with multiple monitors. The Design View monitor also comes with a very well-built ergo arm that allows you to move the monitor into any orientation or any viewing angle in one simple and fluid motion. The monitor also has a built-in KVM switch that allows you to connect up to 2 different hosts and easily switch between them with their included G2 puck for easy reachability. The 27-inch designer monitor starts at $629, but if you click the link in the description and use the code listed, 9 to 5 Mac viewers can get 10% off. So for less than $600, this monitor is a must for any designer. Thank you to BenQ for partnering up with 9 to 5 Mac on this video. Again, be sure to click on the link below to support us and BenQ and find out more. And now, back to the video. So before we talk about each one of these iPads, I do want to mention as to why Apple is actually revamping everything in 2024, because in 2023 was, I think, the first year in a long time we got 0 iPad updates, right? The last iPad update that we saw was to the 10th generation iPad, and then also the M2 iPad Pro, which released late last year in 2022. So this year, Apple did see a drop in iPad sales overall, I believe by about 10 million in terms of what they expected to sell. So again, Apple's going to need to innovate a little bit, change up the actual iPad lineup to make people want to go out and spend their hard-earned money on something like a fully loaded iPad Pro, because they do get relatively expensive. So what to expect from the 2024 iPad lineup? The first iPad that's going to be coming out in chronological order will be a new iPad Air in Q1. So the iPad Air has been kind of in this weird middle ground because it's technically the cheapest entry point into getting an M1 chip in the entirety of Apple's lineup, both on the iPad side and the MacBook side. So being able to jump into an M1 iPad, even though it's just an iPad Air, but with the M1 chip came things like Stage Manager and extended monitor support, so there wasn't a lot that you weren't getting for the price in that iPad Air, aside from the fact that it was a 64 gig starting storage. But what we should expect to see with a brand new iPad Air, we're probably going to get some new colors, or kind of in that same pastel-y colorway, just some additional colors, because like Apple likes to keep those a little bit more playful than the iPad Pro, which is for professionals. But the iPad Air is not only expected to have the same 10.9-inch iPad, but also we will be getting a larger 12.9-inch iPad Air. And I believe Apple's thinking with this is the same thing that they were thinking with the iPhone Plus. They're going to come out with an iPad Air Plus size because people don't want to spend that extra money on a mini LED display. They'd rather spend maybe, let's say, $750 or $749 for an iPad Air Plus than spend $1,100 on an iPad Pro that's 12.9 inches. So I welcome the ability to bring in a new size into the iPad Air lineup, probably a more watered down version. Maybe the hardware isn't as crisp and as clean as iPad Pro or as refined, but that is what to expect with the iPad Air lineup. So think we're going to get the M2 chip, in my opinion, not the M3, because there's going to be a little bit more differentiation between the iPad Air and the iPad Pro. So iPad Air is going to have a 10.9 inch and a 12.9 inch model. It's going to have the M2 chip instead of the M1 chip. It'll still keep the same LCD panel, but it's going to be a little bit newer because there's going to be a new oxidation process, I believe. So it should be a little bit more crisp and a little bit more clear overall. We might not notice it side by side, but that is what to expect according to new manufacturing practices. We'll still have a 60 Hz display, which is unfortunate, but we'll get the 2023 or now the 2024 upgrades for things like Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3. And then something to consider is that I think Apple is going to keep the 12.9 inch and the 10.9 inch iPad Air to still work with the Magic Keyboard, because Apple, I think, is going to do something a little bit different with the Magic Keyboard, which we're going to touch on in a second. But the 12.9-inch iPad Air will work with the older Magic Keyboard that's been around for a little while now. So that's something to consider as well when thinking about that, because some people like the larger size of the iPad Pro, but don't want to spend that iPad Pro money just to get a larger screen. Again, the same thing that Apple thought with the iPhone Plus size. And I will say, and I bet you that the iPad Air 12.9-inch will be the best battery when it comes to any iPad in the iPad lineup. Leave a comment down below. Would you get a larger 12.9-inch iPad Air? Let me know. So now my favorite part, let's get into Q2 of 2024, and that's when we think the iPad Pro will get the revamp, right? The iPad Pro comes in the 11-inch and the 12.9-inch currently with the M2 chip, and the only thing that really differentiates the M2 from the M1 iPad is the hover feature. So I personally did not actually upgrade to the M2 because my M1 iPad Air can do more than enough and more than I needed to already without needing the M2 chip and without needing that hover feature. But I do think Apple will be putting the M3 chip into these iPad Pros, again, to help with the differentiation between the iPad Air lineup, to really make you think if you want the most power, you got to go with the M3 iPad Pro. But also, one thing to consider is that if you notice with the M3 kind of MacBooks that just released, you can actually go with either 8 gigs of unified memory or 18 gigs of unified memory. So I believe if you get a 1 terabyte version or bigger, so the 2 terabyte version iPad Pro, we should be getting 18 gigs of RAM because there is no 16 gigs of RAM variant for the M3 chip in particular. So something to consider. I'm probably going to go with more of a fully loaded iPad Pro this time as opposed to a baseline iPad Pro when it does release. I've been patiently waiting, but that's what I'm going for. There is also a rumor of a larger size iPad Pro as well, maybe in the 14.1-inch space, something along those lines. But the biggest thing to consider is that we will be getting an OLED display. So we're moving from mini LED, which is only on the larger 12.9-inch iPad Pro currently, over to OLED. Now, I personally don't know if we're going to get OLED across both the 11 and the 12.9 and maybe that 14.1, but that remains yet to be seen. So let's see what Apple decides to do. Maybe they keep the same LCD panel that they've had on the iPad Pro, but with ProMotion on the 11-inch, and then save the OLED for the more expensive 14.1 and 12.9. Let's see exactly what Apple does with their lineup on the iPad Pro side, because I want to have as little differentiation between the 11-inch and the larger one, whatever the case or whatever the size may be at that point, because I want to be able to decide, hey, if I want a bigger one, that's the only decision that I'm making, but Apple's gonna Apple and kind of make it a little bit more staggered that way. And then lastly, I do think we're finally getting a new version of the Magic Keyboard. Now, what that looks like, we really have no idea, because what I think Apple's going to do is they're going to keep the old Magic Keyboard around for the new larger iPad Air, but I think Apple's going to revamp the Magic Keyboard on the iPad Pro side, maybe allow us to have some data pass through the pin connectors. Maybe the iPad Pros will have more pin connectors or different kinds of pin connectors to work with this Magic Keyboard so we can get data pass through, because right now with the 3 pin connectors, we can only pass through power, we cannot pass through data. That is why we cannot use like an external drive with that little hinge USB-C port that we have on the current Magic Keyboard. So something to take a note of. My only hope is that it does not get heavier. That Magic Keyboard with the iPad Pro is already a very beefy machine, especially when you compare it to something like the MacBook Air, which is extremely light and gives you the same kind of screen real estate. So something to consider, something I'm excited for. I just hope Apple, again, keeps it nice and light overall, and it's probably going to be very expensive. So I'm hoping Apple lets us trade in our old Magic Keyboard for some sort of value to upgrade to the new Magic Keyboard. So now let's get into the end of the year or the second half of the year, like Q3, Q4. The iPad mini is the iPad that's gotten the least amount of update in terms of how long it's been updated to that new form factor. So it's due for a little bit of an upgrade, but it's not going to be anything crazy. It's going to still have the same form factor, still have the same design. It's just going to be brought up to 2024 standards. So I'm thinking A16 Bionic, Bluetooth 5.3, Wi-Fi 6E, improved cameras on the rear, or maybe adding that dual camera sensor. Let's see what Apple does in that case. And then also it's going to have some new display manufacturing tech. So the display is still going to be a 60 hertz panel. It's still going to be the same panel. It's just going to be manufactured a little bit differently, which ideally will help with that Jelly Scroll issue, which again, Jelly Scroll was all over the news the first week or two that the iPad mini came out. And since then, let me know in the comments if you've heard anything about the Jelly Scroll issue, because I personally haven't. People eventually just forget about all that nonsense because day to day, it doesn't really bother them. But I am excited for a new iPad mini because that's the one that I'm going to probably get for the family just to have around the house. And then lastly, Apple's just probably going to give us a spec bump on the 11th gen iPad, because right now we're on the 10th gen iPad with USB-C, with that new form factor, and now obviously we have the new USB-C pencil, which is pretty much made for that iPad. So Apple is probably just going to improve the internals to the A15 chip to make it a little bit faster, a little bit more future-proof, and that's pretty much going to do it for the lineup. I also think Apple's going to fully discontinue the 9th gen iPad, which means that we're going to finally have no lightning ports in the iPad lineup whatsoever come 2024, and let's see exactly how that actually transitions over, because I'm excited for an all USB-C future. There's still a couple of things left, like the Magic Mouse and the Magic Keyboard for the computer, like some other little accessories. Apple discontinued their MagSafe battery pack, which is one of their best-selling items because it has a lightning port and not a USB-C port. So let's see what Apple does with the rest of their USB-C accessories especially, but that's going to be the entire iPad lineup in a nutshell in 2024. I'm definitely most excited to see what the iPad Air 12.9 inch looks like, what kind of features they have to keep it in that iPad Air kind of box so it doesn't hinder the iPad Pro sales. And then also I want to see if there is going to be a bigger iPad Pro. I want to see it with an OLED display. I want to see it working with a new Magic Keyboard. All very exciting things for me as an iPad Pro only user. Yes, I know that I have a MacBook behind me, but my iPad Pro is my workhorse. It's my main computer. It is how I do everything when it comes to this channel. So I'm very excited to see what Apple does with the iPad Pro lineup because we are due for a nice little upgrade. And that will just about do it for this video, everybody. The iPad lineup is going to be totally revamped. Apple needs to kind of put their best foot forward, even though, yes, they have all the market share in the US, especially when it comes to tablets in general. People don't call tablets tablets here in the US. They call them all iPads, whether it is an Android tablet or not, because that's just what Apple has here in the US market. They own the tablet market. It is absolutely insane. So maybe they haven't felt the need to innovate and they've gotten a little stagnant, but hopefully 2024 really does change that. But leave a comment down below about what you think about this iPad lineup. Is it everything that we want? What do you want to see? Do you think a foldable iPad is in the future? Is that something we would even want? I think a foldable iPad would ruin the actual writability of the screen, but that's just what I think. Leave some comments down below, and if you made it to the very end, leave a little dolphin so I know that you made it to the end. But if you guys want to watch some more iOS, iPadOS, or macOS videos, click on one of these videos right here. And until next time, I'm Fernando, and I'm out of here. Definitely check out BenQ. Definitely check out the BenQ monitor that was mentioned earlier in this video. It works great with extended monitor support and Stage Manager on the iPad especially, and it's pretty good for gaming as well. Peace.